Member for Warren Blackwood.
Thanks, Mr Acting Speaker. I want to support the motion led by the Leader of the National Party to have a select committee set up. I think it's smart. It's a way of bringing all the complexity of the issue that we're debating today into a forum that can then work up a response that gives government some options. Rather than it just sit with the government of the day and it obviously adds its political mark over that and lays out something that may or may not meet the needs of the individuals and the groups that have been affected by what we're seeing as far as protests are concerned. Can I highlight right from the outset in my debate, I don't want to challenge, and nor does the National Party want to challenge, the right to protest. I think there was a very great quote by the English writer Evelyn Hall that said, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Absolutely agree with that. But we also have in our state, in our nation, the rule of law. And when people's individual and/or group rights flow over into invading the privacy and legal rights of others, then we do have to respond. We do have to respond. And that's the tenet of what the National Party are putting forward here, but not just responding to a little issue or something that is fairly easy to lay out an answer to. There's a bit of complexity to this, and the complexity flows right over to the diversity that sits in regional and rural communities in particular, the isolation levels, the level of complexity in and around the farming businesses in particular, as to the impact of what these activists potentially have and could do and achieve, which would be terrible for our sector and terrible for Western Australia. So we are seeing animal activism move to a whole other level. I remember as the Agriculture Minister a number of years ago now, when wool prices got up and land prices got up and sheep prices got up and some of those agricultural commodities that could be taken off a property got up, then we saw the level of theft increase. We put in place, after it was taken away, the stock squad, I think in 2009 from memory, in response to that. But I guess that was the level of it. Whilst they were serious issues, and theft is a serious issue, there were strategies fairly easy to put in place to actually address that and hold those to account that were caught and hopefully have a level of surveillance that was able to reduce the impact of it. But what we're seeing now is a significant step up from that. The level of animal activism that's occurring at a national level, using modern online platforms as strategies to rally the troops, if you like, and target groups, target individuals in a very effective way, is massively threatening, massively threatening. And our laws and rules and the rule of law is underdone, in our view, in response to this, and that's why we are supporting having a select committee to have a closer look at it. The impact of trespassing. Now, when I go through these issues, I'm not talking about trespassing over a fence in an urban area or in a metropolitan suburb whereby you have a number of people close by, or you have some services you can actually call upon close by. We're talking about relatively isolated rural areas, in some cases very isolated, whereby there's a handful of family members living in those locations that could well be targeted and impacted by a series of people who have a very, very serious agenda. So when I talk about the issues that are impacted here, we're talking about in a very, very unique environment which we need to respond to. So trespassing, as simple as that, that is a significant issue in a fairly isolated rural area. Interfering with livestock. You have farmers going to great lengths to look after animals because they know if they're presenting animals in a sound way that are healthy and of a good nutritional standing, they will sell well and obviously return a good profit to them in the marketplace and indeed into whatever market they choose to submit it to. If we have anyone interfering with that, changing the processes that, whether it be grazing methods, whether it be some level of intensification or intensive feeding, then you have implications on the actual welfare of livestock in some cases. Biosecurity risks that have been mentioned by the Leader of the National Party. We are very, very lucky in Australia, and we are also particularly lucky in Western Australia, where we are in effect a biological island. There are a lot of diseases, livestock diseases, plant diseases for that matter, at an international level that we simply don't have. Maintaining vigilance on our borders at a national and state level is critical to our agricultural sectors and maintaining that area of freedom, not only in terms of the productivity risks that those biosecurity risks pose to the livestock themselves, but in terms of market access, because many markets you can't access unless you can demonstrate area of freedom. So these issues are significant, and they're significant to what is somewhere between an $8 and $9 billion sector in Western Australia. So again, the game that's been played here by these groups has massive risk that I'm sure falls short on them when it's raised. And that is the sort of complexity that we need to layer into a very, very sound discussion about what the right strategies might be to respond to it. That's a level of complexity that's not going to happen in a little government agency that says, right, this is what we think we should do, perhaps in terms of penalties or some other response. This is a level of response that needs to go to a whole nother tier, because that's the level of threat that's being put on these sectors. Then we move into privacy. Privacy matters, as the leader of the National Party mentioned, of individuals that live in their house on these rural properties, which are their business, in fairly isolated areas, is quite threatening. Now I know, and National Party will acknowledge every day that we have in the agricultural sector some challenges. There's some people that don't do the right thing. Some people that don't do the right thing in respect to animal welfare or some of the processes that they use for management of their property, and they need to be dealt with, absolutely. Just like I'm sure there's a bunch of vegan activists out there that have been to prison. So no one escapes the law as it applies to doing the right thing and following the law of the land. So we recognise that, but there are a whole heap of issues that are emerging out of the behaviour we're seeing with activists now that take everything to another level. The Aussie Farms website map identifying properties, at best it's irresponsible. At best it's irresponsible. At a whole nother range of levels, you are putting onto an international internet platform the location of properties to be targeted by groups that have a very, very specific agenda. A very, very specific agenda. That's massively threatening. Just look at the level of social media response that we're seeing now on the football field, whether it be in schools with violence. There's a whole range of areas where we are seeing the level of exposure that online platforms are giving to groups and people that want to make commentary. This is the same issue that's now starting to get layered into the agricultural sector. We need to respond to that, and we need to respond appropriately, and it's not going to take a 5-minute conversation around a cabinet table to resolve it. It's going to take something a bit more complex than that, and that's why the Leader of the National Party has put up a strategy here with bipartisan support to have a select committee to actually look at all the issues of concern, to bring those issues forward, get some advice from all the respective groups that are impacted, ensure that we get the benefit of what happens in other jurisdictions, strategies that they've taken to actually address it and to actually respond appropriately. There's a couple of, a couple of specific issues I'd like to talk about. One of those is drones, and I was watching telly last night on the ABC News, as I'm sure a lot of members here were doing last night, and saw this drone drop in, probably Uber Eats or something, a drone Uber Eats, if there's such a thing, on someone's backyard. The kids raced out and grabbed it, and away they went back inside. So we now have... ACT, was it? So absolutely amazing that now we have technology to deliver to someone's backyard with a drone from presumably some sort of source. Now I'm assuming meals, packages, all sorts of stuff. I guess we knew it was coming. I'm not sure I fully appreciated that it's going to be rolled out in a particular suburb of Canberra, but that's there. So you can see the technology that's starting to move, that's getting ahead of where our laws sit, where our regulations sit in terms of managing what people are able to do in our community. And now it's starting to extend into clandestine surveillance of properties. That only supports the whole issue of theft, trespassing. If someone's putting these into areas actually trespassing onto private property, unlawful activities that might flow from that, Can I say, without putting too much on the table, I've got a house in Perth, like a unit in Perth. It's up off the ground. I'm on floor 8 in the complex of units, and I remember seeing a drone sitting outside my window in an apartment complex, buzzing up in the middle there with the camera spinning around. And more than once I've been in a number of states of undress, and that's the last thing. So it does bring you to attention about what the issues are that this actually has, and that's right in the middle of Perth, let alone in a fairly isolated area whereby that sort of sophisticated technology is able to be used in ways we actually don't want it to be used. It's very, very unsettling. You've also got the issue of drones in respect to potential stress and potential sort of injury to animals if they're disturbed. Those are all issues that, you've got lambing ewes or lambing cows, not lambing cows, calving cows that you don't want to be upset. They're put in particular paddocks for good reason, and if someone's doing the wrong thing, then all those things are potential risks. Terribly difficult to identify the perpetrators. Terribly difficult. If someone walks on your property and you see them and you see their number plate and you've got an idea, you've got a drone that buzzes in and buzzes out, you don't know who the hell's been there. It's got a potential strategy of aiding theft. Images. We know what happens when you get an image and you whip it up on onto the World Wide Web. You can mess with that image, you can Photoshop that image, you can have that image being presented in whatever way you'd like to present to support the case you're making. Again, you don't want that sort of stuff up there. One, it's being private, but secondly, it's being used in an inappropriate way. I remember quite unrelated, but I do make the point. I've got 3 grandchildren down in Esperance, and my daughter had a very quick word at me when I decided to put a picture of myself and my granddaughter up on a Twitter. Didn't like it, and I absolutely respect her view on that. I didn't even think about it. And she wants to be absolutely in charge with her husband of what images of her kids go up on the internet. And I guess I make the same point here in a very different scenario. You don't want to see images of your backyard, of your family, of even people in the workplace, of animals put up on the World Wide Web that is your private space and in many ways used for ulterior motives with an agenda. And again, this is technology and a platform for targeting a specific agenda from a group that we have not got contemporary laws and legislation and regulations to support and actually address. And that's why we've brought this forward. Stock theft is another one. I think we brought in 2009 the Livestock Compliance Unit. One of the initiatives was about actually hooking up members of the police force dedicated to a unit with in those days, key people from the Department of Agriculture. So you had the livestock skills that you could team up with detective skills to be able to resolve issues. Again, I think that was a smart model, and I think the leader of the National Party is really asking government. So, what's your thoughts on that? Because again, having some sort of compliance unit or stock squad makes a bit of sense. However, moving into a very different arena about what I've actually described here. And of course, I believe, we believe that the community, the rural community in particular, is ready to move in support of this. They will engage in the forums that they need to be the eyes and ears to support whatever unit or whatever organisation the government chooses to be the sharp point of actually addressing the key issues that we're seeing occurring. I just want to reinforce the point that in all I've said, I want you to put it through the filter of a family living in a very isolated part of Western Australia. They might be 40 or 50 kilometres from the nearest town, and that's a close one in some cases. They might be even more than that away from key services, support, police, other organisations that might be able to lend support to them. That is the environment, that is the filter you must put the discussion here through, because that is the filter that says that there's a level of threat there, a level of concern, a level of fright that we don't want to see, and we want to see government support the legislative and regulatory changes necessary in order to actually address that. There's a layer of complexity coming into this discussion now that was not there before. It was not there before. And that's why we need to have more than just your average discussion. We want to have a select committee to be able to come together, to be able to put the necessary recommendations to government with all the input from all the respective interest groups that have some thoughts on this, as well as other jurisdictions, both nationally and internationally, to be able to get a good outcome. Thank you, Acting Speaker.